from the Freedom Association. That's where he's from. And it's in reference to what I was just telling you about a second ago. Jeremy Paxman criticised the BBC for being biased and politically correct and called for the licence fee to be abolished. Because if Amazon and Netflix can do it, so can they. Yeah, that debate, which we've warned you about, is still very much in the air. It's not going to go away. It's got something of the inevitable about it. The BBC this week has warned that British youth culture is being warped by American companies like Facebook and Netflix. The corporation wants to try and wrest back internet-addicted kids' attention from YouTube and other online services dominated by the US. If you've got kids, there's one called FGTV. You ever heard of that? Oh, I've heard no end of it. Right? That's all that goes on. I look after help look after my girlfriend's child with her, and wow, she loves something called FGTV on YouTube, like more than anything else on the television. That's the treat. Switch the telly on. That's hard work. All right, YouTube time. It's FGTV. Loves it. It's got the air of the inevitable about it. This debate is not going to go away. Let's talk now to Andrew Allison from the Freedom Association, who has long campaigned for the abolition of the licence fee. I bet you're grinning away as these news stories come in, aren't you, Andrew?
Yeah, I was really enjoying it when I read that on Sunday that Jeremy Paxman had said that. And I read the interview in the Sunday Times as well. I think him and Rod Liddle had a good laugh about it, because I think him and Rod Liddle pretty much agreed. So, yeah, very happy. And he used a wonderful word as well to describe the licence fee, antediluvian. A beautiful word, and just sums it up.
What does it mean, antediluvian?
It's just very old-fashioned.
Right.
It's just something from a bygone era, something not fit for purpose for the modern world that we live in.
It's an antediluvian word.
Well, it is pretty much, isn't it? But when you write all day, you do tend to come across a few words that perhaps others wouldn't.
Yeah, I like it. I don't think I've ever used it. I may have read it when it was written down, but I like that. Okay, so first of all, Andrew, let's just tackle this, right? Imagine if there was a world without the BBC. I mean, that's kind of, you've been campaigning about the licence fee for some time, but imagine if we did literally just wipe that from view. Do you think that would be a better world if we just didn't have it at all?
No, I don't. I think there are things that the BBC does that I do like. I was actually talking to your producer about half an hour ago, and I mentioned CBeebies. So I've got a little one-year-old boy, and quite often some of the programmes there are wonderful unpaid babysitters. It will just keep his attention just for a little while you just nip out to the loo or something that's simple like that. But I actually think what is on there is very good. I know that ties in with what else the BBC has announced this week as well, but I actually think that's very good. But that's not a reason to keep the licence fee. That's a reason to export that and to maximise your revenue from it, because I would certainly pay a subscription fee for that.
You see, it's interesting. I've got a text here, a tweet from someone from Corvefi, which is the thing that Donald Trump tweeted recently. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Anyway, they've tweeted us and they say, listen, Nick, there's a reason why youngsters are sick of the BBC. It's too PC. Generation Z and younger love the variety of free speech in America. I think there's something to that, isn't there, Andrew? We're competing on a global scale now. It's not just 5 channels anymore.
That is true, and that is actually a very good point. I mean, some of it can be, particularly on the children's side of it, and some of it can be a little bit old-fashioned. But I think you pay your money and you take your choice. I rather like that, and I also rather like the fact that it's not punctuated with lots of adverts that are trying to sell, my child something, and it's going to cost me a lot more money. But you just take your money and take your choice.
Do you think, for me personally, I actually don't mind the idea of a child watching adverts, because I think it teaches a form of intelligence to them that is absent from the kind of education you get from the BBC, which essentially suggests you should trust the media. I don't think you should. I think you should view every last word coming out of that box with a degree of suspicion, no?
Well, that is true as well. I can see your point on that. But there's 2 ways of looking at it, though, isn't there? I think once they start reaching a certain age where they actually understand that there isn't a magic money tree, and I know if you're a politician, perhaps you don't even come to that point.
There is a magic money tree. It's in the Cayman Islands, but go on anyway.
Something like that. I do believe that Gordon Brown found it in the Downing Street garden, but lost it again. But you know, as soon as they reach that, and they can actually understand it, and you can save up your pocket money perhaps, and or save up money that you get from birthdays or Christmas, and then you can buy that and all the rest of it. Then that's absolutely fine. I think when they're very young and they don't really understand the value of money at all, that becomes a little bit more difficult.
Right, I see. Because for me, you know, I think that the values that you get from commercial television and commercial radio are actually more suited to the real world, because the values that you get from the BBC, particularly these are the politically correct ideas that you extract from the BBC, they chop and change. They're not consistent, whereas the commercial radio world teaches you things like work hard, or the commercial media world, you know, work hard and you can have anything you want. That's the basic message, isn't it?
I think it is. I think you're right there. I think the problem with the BBC, it falls over itself trying to be unbiased, and I mean the whole thing's to do with Laura Koonsberg, the BBC's political editor, and she's had a lot of vile abuse thrown at her because she's been seen as too right wing, because she doesn't like Jeremy Corbyn. And yet you'll get some of the presenters who are accused, rightly or wrongly, of being too left wing. And why don't we just accept that if you have a completely unbiased presentation and you try to remain scrupulously neutral, it is actually boring. It switches off the listener or the viewer or the reader.
It's also not possible. I mean, the other thing, Andrew, to be absolutely clear here, I mean, I don't buy this notion that you can be an impartial media. I'll just try and put this argument into a nutshell. First of all, there's a great insight, isn't there, that there's an objective perspective. That great insight of the objective perspective, although it's quasi-religious, it comes from our understanding of the scientific method, where, you know, you take out all of the subjective concerns and so on and so forth. But the point of that, Andrew, is it's an inhuman perspective. You know, we all have a perspective, you know, and scientific mind is not scientific analysis is not everything, is it? It's one way of looking at the world, and that's what I think the problem is. You know, I think they're chasing a madman's dream, trying to be impartial.
I agree with that as well, Nick. It is actually impossible, but as I said, the attempts to do it just make for very sort of boring radio and very, very boring television. I mean, for example, you know, I much prefer to listen to someone like Nick Ferrari on LBC on a morning, who's really going for it and actually inject a bit of personality, inject some of his views, rather than listening to Today on Radio 4, which I do tune into occasionally, but it does tend to be quite boring at times, unless you get John Humphreys in his prime.
You see, what I think so strange about, though, this idea of impartiality, and furthermore, that we should fund impartiality, what I think is so absolutely strange about it is, first of all, anyone who thinks about it with a piece of paper and a pen for more than half a minute is going to realise it's not possible to be impartial. And then secondly, this notion that there are certain good messages that we should have beamed into our minds by the government, and that we should pay for that, essentially with the threat of prison hanging over our shoulder in the background. I can't think of a much more tyrannical setup than the one which we're describing. Yet people take it, oh, that's okay, that's not a problem. They don't seem to have a big issue with it. You're talking about the Freedom Association. I'll tell you what, we absolutely need freedom from the licence fee, because that's tyranny, is it not? That's tyranny. A sleeping, tyrannical organisation waiting to be awakened, no? It
is a tyranny. And what always sort of amazes me is that the BBC tries to pretend it's very liberal, that it believes in, well, it would attack, or you hear report after report attacking the government if it's means testing too many things, and poor people can't afford this and poor people can't afford that. But when it comes to the licence fee, it just goes very quiet on it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's if, well, no, but that's the government. This is us, and at 40p a day, we're absolutely great value for money, etc., etc. We've heard all of this, but the fact is, there are some people who don't watch the BBC, or watch very, very little BBC, or don't listen to the radio, or whatever. And yet they're absolutely forced to pay for something that they don't want, and they can be sent to prison for it. And the BBC just seems to think that's okay. It's a complete tyranny.
It's shockingly morally wrong. And then what happens is people get wrapped into this debate about how we should be impartial. Well, are we going too much to the left, or are we moving too much to the right? No, look, we're moving in a direction, right? We're moving forwards towards more government power, all right? Whether or not we swerve to the left or the right a little bit is kind of irrelevant. You want a picture of BBC bias? I'll give you it. We've all seen it. It's that picture of the news team. They have the Queen behind them, right? Have you seen the picture I'm talking about? She did a little tour of the BBC. She's in the background in the newsroom looking at them, and everyone is looking backwards towards her. There's your BBC bias. It's biased towards the state. It's biased towards the government, and it's unquestioningly biased as well. That's the other terrible thing. The only moment we can think of really when it properly questioned, it was sanctioned for, and that's during the war in Iraq. I mean, for me personally, I find it absolutely staggering that people are so fine with that idea of 100 and something quid coming out of their wages every single year to fund this organisation which views them with contempt. I mean, I genuinely say, I'm ranting myself. Listen, I'm going off on one here. I want to know, you tell me this, Andrew, how is the Freedom Association going about tackling the behemoth that is the BBC?
Well, we keep attacking the BBC. We keep attacking the licence fee. I wrote something again last week about the BBC bias over Brexit, which is just so obvious. I mean, if there's any bad story about Brexit, then they're jumping onto it. They don't try and explain both sides on the Brexit debate. So, for example, when Angela Merkel makes a few statements, they don't try to put it into context. Please remember that Angela Merkel is facing an election in 2 or 3 months' time. So, therefore, she's speaking very much to her home constituency, and everything's got to be viewed through that prism. They don't do anything like that to explain it. But what you were just saying before about the state having too much power, I mean, there's just a couple of examples. Poor little baby Charlie Gard. I mean, no parent would ever want to be in that position. In fact, you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. But the whole state has just closed ranks on this. I'm firmly of the belief that it's up to the parents to decide. They're the ones who've got to live with it. Live with any decision, and it's up to them. And if there's potential of life-saving treatment across in the US, and a US doctor wouldn't just turn around and say come across just on a whim. There's that, but there's also things to do after the horrible attack in Finsbury Park, where the Prime Minister made a statement and said that Islamophobia is extremism, and she's already trying to get together an extremism bill to go through Parliament. But she can't define extremism. So therefore, you're going to have the courts virtually deciding what extremism is, and we're going to have judges making these sort of decisions. And there's more and more power to the state, and it affects our free speech, our freedom of expression. So it's always the state comes in that. You remember that Aisha King case a few years ago, Nick, about 2014, where the parents took their baby out of.
Yeah, we referenced it earlier on the show. I do remember. Yeah, and the guy had to abscond from the country, and then the coverage of it was, well, I'll let you carry on from there.
And do you? Well, I'm sure listeners will remember that the whole power of the state was unleashed on his parents. I mean, you had a European arrest warrant out, Europol, social services shouting about it, the whole medical profession closing ranks, and it was eventually David Cameron had the good sense to say, whoa, stop this. And what happened? That little boy went across to Prague, got some life-saving treatment. Now he's free of cancer. Now he's at school. And if it had been up to the medical profession in this country, would he be in such good shape? But the whole power of the state really went down on those parents, who all they wanted to do was to save their child's life and do the best that they could for their child. So yes, the state does have too much power.
You know what? Just to add to that point there, I want to put a horseshoe in the boxing glove for you, because I completely agree with what you're saying. But just for people to remind them of the case, what happened is it initially was reported that this guy, maybe he was religious, some sort of nutter, didn't know what he was doing, or in all sorts of different media organisations. The establishment's point of view was put forward first. And the key point about the case from memory is that he took to YouTube. He actually videoed himself and said, all right, I'm the dad, and I'll tell you what's actually happening. And the story he told was almost unrecognisable compared to the point of view we'd been given from the establishment. And absolutely, in my opinion, that's a moment when the BBC visibly dropped the ball in its role as, what's it supposed to be? The fifth estate, the voice of the people. But it wasn't. It was putting forward the establishment point of view, and that became apparent immediately once he responded on YouTube, the father. I couldn't agree with you more. Like I say, horseshoe in the a horseshoe in the boxing glove there to help take down your opponent.